Margaret Hale slid a check for $1 million across the polished walnut table and told the man in the faded flannel to disappear from her daughter's life. What she did not know, what no one in that house knew, was that the quiet man with sawdust under his fingernails could have bought the Hale family empire twice over and never felt the dent. It was an ordinary Friday in Hollis Creek, Vermont, the kind of late autumn morning where the air smelled of wood smoke and the maples had gone the color of old copper. Caleb Mercer was in his workshop before the sun cleared the ridge, the way he always was. The radiator ticked. The smell of linseed oil and warm sawdust hung in the rafters. He ran a cloth along the grain of a butternut tabletop, feeling for the places the wood still needed him. He did not hurry. He never hurried any more. Daddy. Lily sat cross-legged on the workbench in her socks, 7 years old, a juice box in her fist. Mr. Pickle is watching you work. Mr. Pickle is watching you work. Mr. Pickle is watching you work. Pickle was a one-eyed stuffed turtle. Caleb glanced at the turtle, then at his daughter, and nodded gravely. Then I'd better not embarrass myself. She giggled. He smiled at the wood. 2 years a widower, and her laugh was still the only sound that reached all the way into him. The phone on the wall rang at 9. Caleb wiped his hands and answered the way he answered everything, slowly, with no wasted words. The woman on the line was crisp and tired and used to being obeyed. She was the operations director for Hale Heritage Furnishings, the oldest furniture house in New England. Their 75th anniversary gala was in 3 weeks. The founder's original collection, 12 heirloom pieces, the very chairs and cabinets the company had been built on, were being moved out of storage for display, and they were in worse shape than anyone had admitted. Every restorer they'd called was either booked or not good enough. Caleb Mercer's name kept coming up. People said he was the best hands in the state. People said he could make dead wood remember what it used to be. Caleb looked at the butternut table, at Lily, at the turtle. I work alone, he said. And I bring my daughter. There was a pause. The sound of someone deciding whether they had the luxury of objecting. They did not. When can you start? Monday, he hung up before she could thank him. The Hale estate sat above the river on 40 acres of stone walls and sugar maples, a great grey house that had watched 3 generations of money come and go. When Caleb's old Ford rolled up the drive that Monday, gravel popping under the tyres, a man in a navy blazer came out to meet him and looked at the truck the way you'd look at something tracked in on a shoe. Deliveries go around back, the man said. I'm not delivering, Caleb said. I'm the restorer. The man's eyes moved over the flannel, the worn boots, the little girl unbuckling herself in the passenger seat. You're Mercer? I am. Garrett Voss. He did not offer his hand. He offered a smile instead, smooth as a coat of varnish, the kind of smile that closes deals and closes doors. Chief Operating Officer. I'll be honest with you, Mr. Mercer. I argued against bringing in an outsider. These pieces are the soul of this company. They're worth more than your house. Caleb lifted his toolbox out of the truck bed. Then you'll want them done right. He walked past Voss toward the house. Behind him he heard the man's voice drop, low and private, into a phone. He's here. The carpenter. No, we proceed Thursday. She doesn't need to know until after the vote. A pause. And keep him away from the East Archive. Caleb's step didn't change, but he heard it. He heard all of it. And the words East Archive sat down somewhere in the back of his mind and did not leave. They put him in the old conservatory, where the founder's collection waited under dust sheets like furniture in a dream. Caleb pulled the first sheet back and went very still. It was a chair, tall-backed hand-carved butternut and bird's-eye maple, the arms worn smooth by 75 years of hands. Along the crest rail ran a vine of carved oak leaves, and tucked into the leaves so small you'd miss it unless you knew to look, was a tiny carved beetle. A maker's signature, a joke between a craftsman and the wood. Caleb knew that beetle. He had grown up with that beetle. That's the Hollis chair, said a voice behind him, the one that started everything. He turned. The woman in the doorway was perhaps 35, in a charcoal suit, dark hair pulled back, a tablet under her arm. She had exhaustion under her eyes that she was working very hard to hide. She had the posture of someone who had been the most capable person in every room since she was 12. "Adeline Hale," she said. "Everyone calls me Addie. I run this place." She said it without warmth, sizing him up. "You're the magician they hired. I'm the guy who fixes furniture. Same thing, apparently, for what we're paying." She crossed to the chair, set a protective hand on its back. "My grandfather designed this in 1951. It's not insured for what it's worth because nothing's insured for what it's worth. So whatever you're planning to do to it, nothing," Caleb said. "Not yet." He crouched, eye level with the joint where the seat met the leg, and pointed without touching. "Your grandfather didn't design this." The silence in the conservatory changed temperature. Addie's voice went cold. "Excuse me?" "The joinery's a hand-cut dovetail, blind, with a maple key." "That's not a 1951 Hale technique. Hale used dowels and glue in 51. You can see it in the rest of the line. This is older, better. Somebody who learned the old way made this chair." He stood, brushing his knees. "Your grandfather may have sold it. He may have built the company on it. But he didn't carve it. The man who carved it signed it. See the beetle?" Addie looked at the beetle for a long moment. Then she looked at Caleb the way you look at a stranger who has just said your middle name without being told it. "Nobody knows about the beetle," she said quietly. "How do you know about the beetle?" She said quietly. "How do you know about the beetle?" Caleb picked up his rag. "I know wood," he said, and that was all he said. And that night, back in the little house at the edge of town, he tucked Lily into bed and sat for a long time in the dark of his own workshop. There was a drawer in his bench that locked. He had not opened it in 2 years. He did not open it in 2 years. He did not open it now, but he rested his hand on it, the way a man rests his hand on a grave, and then he went to bed without sleeping much. The restoration took its rhythm over the next several days. Caleb worked. Lily drew pictures on the conservatory floor and made friends, the way only 7-year-olds can, with everyone, the cook, the gardener, even the cool and careful Addie. One afternoon Addie found herself sitting on the floor being shown a crayon drawing of the lady who runs the castle. She was not entirely hating it. "You drew me with a sword," Addie said. "Because you're brave," Lily said matter of fact. "Daddy says brave people get tired but they don't stop. You look tired." Addie didn't answer. Across the room, Caleb sanded an armrest and pretended not to listen. Something he hadn't felt in 2 years moved quietly in his chest and then went still again. But under the warmth, the house was rotting from the inside. And Caleb was beginning to see the rot. It started with the ledger. On the 4th day, working on a tall secretary desk from the Founder's Collection, Caleb found that one of the drawer bottoms sat a half-inch too high. False bottom. He built a dozen himself. He pried it gently, and underneath, wrapped in oilcloth gone brittle with age, was a slim leather ledger and a black-and-white photograph. The photograph showed 2 young men outside a small mill, arms over each other's shoulders, grinning. One of them was a young Theodore Hale. Caleb recognized him from the portrait in the front hall. The other man Caleb recognized too, and his hands went cold around the photo, because the other man was the one who had taught him to find the beetle in the wood. The other man was his own father, Samuel Mercer, dead now 11 years. He did not open the ledger right away. He sat with the photograph for a long time, and from the doorway, unseen, Garrett Voss watched him sit with it. Garrett Voss's smooth face did something it did not usually do. It tightened. "Find something interesting," Voss said, stepping in. Caleb slid the photograph into his shirt pocket, unhurried. "Old picture," came loose from the backing. He held up the ledger. "You'll want it for the archive." "I'll take it." Voss put out his hand. Caleb gave him the ledger. He did not give him the photograph, and he noted, as Voss tucked the ledger under his arm and left too quickly, that the man had not asked a single question about what was in it, which meant Garrett Voss already knew. Evening, Addie found Caleb in the conservatory after the staff had gone. The Founder's chair gleamed under the work lamp, restored now, alive again. "It's beautiful," she said. And then, after a silence, "Why are you really here, Mr. Mercer? Why are you really here, Mr. Mercer? You hired me. My operations director hired me. I've been running this company for 4 years on no sleep, holding off a board that thinks I'm too young and too female and too sentimental about a furniture line that doesn't make money." She folded her arms. "There's a vote Thursday. Garrett wants to license our founder's designs to an overseas manufacturer, mass-produce them, plastic and veneer, kill the workshop, lay off the craftsmen, and slap my grandfather's name on garbage. He says it's the only way to save the company. He's got the votes." Her jaw tightened. "And in the middle of the worst month of my life, my mother insists we throw a gala, and a man I've never met shows up who knows things about my family that I don't, and looks at me like he's sorry for something he hasn't done yet." She paused. "So I'll ask again, why are you here?" Caleb looked at her for a long moment. He could have told her then. He almost did. Instead, he said, "Some chairs are worth saving." Addie Hale, who had not let anyone past her guard in 4 years, felt the back of her throat ache for no reason she could name. She turned away before he could see it. Margaret Hale summoned him the next morning. The matriarch received him in the formal sitting room, 71 years old and straight-backed in pearls, with a face that had decided everything important long before Caleb was born. She did not ask him to sit. She let him stand on the rug like a man delivering coal. "My daughter," she said, "is under a great deal of pressure. She does not need complications. And you, Mr. Mercer, are precisely the kind of complication a tired woman talks herself into." She slid an envelope across the low table. From it she withdrew a check, and she filled in the amount in front of him in a hand that did not shake. $1 million. You will finish the restoration. You will collect your fee. And then you and your daughter will go back to wherever you came from, and you will not contact Adeline again. I'm told everyone has a number, Mr. Mercer. I assume this is generously above yours." The room was very quiet. Out the tall windows the maples burned red against a grey sky. Caleb looked at the cheque. He looked at it for a long time, long enough that Margaret Hale allowed herself the smallest flicker of triumph at the corner of her mouth. Then Caleb picked it up, and he set it back down in front of her, unfolded, the ink still drying. Mrs. Hale," he said gently, "I'm not going to take your money." He paused. "And in 3 weeks you're going to wish I had." He left her sitting there with the cheque between them like a thing that had died. That night, after Lily was asleep, Caleb Mercer went down to his workshop and unlocked the drawer in his bench for the first time in 2 years. Inside lay the old photograph of his father and Theodore Hale. Beside it, a leather folder, and beneath that a single cell phone he had not turned on since he buried his wife. He pressed the photograph flat on the bench, took out the leather folder, and laid the founder's original 1951 design papers beside it. Papers he had owned, quietly, for a long time. Then he powered on the phone, dialed a number he knew by heart, and waited. A voice answered on the second ring. "Mr. Mercer." "It's been a while." Caleb looked at the beetle his father had carved 75 years ago into a chair that built another man's empire. "It's me," he said. "Pull everything we hold on Hale Heritage, the debts, the building, all of it, and find me whatever Garrett Voss has been hiding in the East Archive." He picked up the photograph. "Then start the process. Quietly. I want to be in that boardroom Thursday." A pause on the line. "And how do you want to be listed on the cap table, sir? Under the trust or under your own name?" Caleb looked out the window toward the ridge, toward the great grey house where a tired woman ran an empire she didn't know he already owned. "My own name," he said. "It's time." The days before the vote moved like water under ice. Calm on the surface, fast and cold underneath. Caleb kept working the founder's collection because stopping would have told Voss something was wrong. Each morning the old Ford rolled up the gravel drive, Lily in the passenger seat with Mr. Pickle, and each morning Garrett Voss watched from an upstairs window with the patience of a man who believes he has already won. But the patience had a new edge to it now. Twice Caleb caught him on the phone in the corridor, voice dropping the moment Caleb came near. Once he found the conservatory door, which he always left open for the light, closed and locked from the outside, with Lily's crayon still inside. "It sticks sometimes," Voss said pleasantly, when Caleb found him. "Old house." "Sure," Caleb said. He did not believe it. That night he moved the leather folder and the design papers out of his workshop drawer and into a safe deposit box in town. He told Eleanor Reyes to move faster. But the days were not all suspicion. In the long amber afternoons, while Caleb coaxed life back into 75-year-old wood, the great grey house slowly let the Mercers in. It happened the way it always does, through the child. Lily made a kingdom of the conservatory. She named the heron on the river. She convinced the cook to teach her how to fold dumplings and came home smelling of ginger. And she adopted Addie Hale the way a cat adopts a person who has clearly been waiting their whole life for a cat and didn't know it. One grey afternoon, Addie came down to the conservatory to find Lily asleep on a dust sheet in a square of weak sun, the turtle tucked under her chin. Caleb sat beside her sanding a drawer, front by hand, slow and quiet so as not to wake her. "She wears out," he said softly, "talks until she falls over. Her mother did the same thing." He didn't look up. It was the first time he had mentioned her. Addie sat down on the floor, in her charcoal suit, on a dust sheet, something the Addie of a month ago would never have done. "What was she like?" For a while, Caleb only sanded. The grain came up gold under his hands. "Her name was Sarah," he said at last. "She was the one who told me to keep the wood when I sold the firm. Everybody said sell it all. Take the money. Buy something with a view." A faint, tired smile crossed his face. "She said a man should keep one thing his hands remember, so I kept the workshop. The sanding slowed. She was sick for 14 months. I had more money than I'd ever spend, and I couldn't buy a single one of those months back. After, I sat in that empty shop and I thought, all right, all right, all right. The money was never the thing. The thing was always the hands." He looked at his daughter, asleep in the light. And her. Addie did not say "I'm sorry" because she had learned in 4 hard years that the words were a door people closed, not opened. She said instead she was right about keeping one thing. She usually was. He set the drawer front down. "It's why I couldn't let your grandfather's chairs go overseas in a box. They're somebody's one thing. They're my father's." He looked at her then, direct. "And I'm starting to think this place is yours." Across the conservatory, the founder's chair gleamed, almost finished. Lily slept on. And in the quiet, 2 tired people sat on a dust sheet a foot apart and didn't fill the silence. The silence was the most honest thing either of them had felt in years. The vote was Thursday. Thursday came grey and cold, with a skin of frost on the windshields in the Hale Heritage parking lot. The boardroom sat on the top floor of the company's headquarters in town, a long room of glass and old oak where 75 years of decisions had been made. Adeline Hale arrived early, as she always did, and found the table already half full. Garrett Voss sat at the far end with 2 of the overseas representatives, a thin stack of contracts squared neatly in front of him, and a smile that had already decided how the morning would end. "Addie," he said her name warmly, the way a man says a name he is about to outvote. "I know we don't see this the same way, but after today you'll thank me. We're saving this company. You're gutting it," she said. "I'm keeping the lights on." He spread his hands. Sentiment doesn't make payroll. The Hale name goes on the licensed line. The overseas partners handle production. The debt gets serviced. And your grandfather's legacy lives forever in 1,000 showrooms instead of dying in a workshop nobody can afford. He glanced at the clock. 11 votes on this board. I have 7 committed. With respect, you've already lost. The vote is a formality. Addie looked at the contracts. She had read them a dozen times and found nothing she could use, only the slow arithmetic of her own defeat. She sat at the head of the table because it was her table even today and folded her hands so no one could see them shake. The clock reached the hour. Voss rose. Then let's begin. The motion before the board is the licensing and production agreement with... The door at the end of the room opened. Caleb Mercer walked in. He had traded the flannel for a plain dark suit that fit him the way truth fits a thing, and he carried a single leather folder, and beside him walked a silver-haired woman in a sharp grey suit whom no one recognized but everyone instinctively sat up straighter for. Behind them, a man in a navy windbreaker with 3 letters across the back stood in the doorway and did not come in. "Who are you?" Voss said. The smile was still there. It had simply stopped meaning anything. "My name is Caleb Mercer." He set the folder on the table. "I've been restoring the Founders collection, but that's not why I'm here." He looked down the length of the table. "I'm here because I own this company's debt, all of it, $41 million in notes you've spent 2 years quietly defaulting on, Mr. Voss. 8 months ago, a holding trust bought every one of those notes from the banks you'd stopped paying." He paused. "I'm the trust." The room went absolutely still. Addie's head came up. The silver-haired woman opened her own folder and spoke in the dry, exact voice of someone who bills by the minute. "Eleanor Reyes, counsel for the Mercer Trust. As controlling creditor, Mr. Mercer holds a senior lien that supersedes board authority on any transfer or licensing of company assets. No asset of Hale Heritage moves without his signature." She set a single page in front of Voss, including the founder's designs. Voss had gone the colour of old wax, but he had talked his way out of every room he'd ever been cornered in, and he tried it now. This is an ambush. A creditor buys some paper and thinks he can walk in and... "Sit down, Garrett." Margaret Hale's voice came from the doorway. The matriarch stood there in her pearls, and beside her, holding her hand, was Lily Mercer in her good dress, clutching a one-eyed turtle. Margaret had found the girl in the lobby. The girl had told her with 7-year-old certainty that her daddy was upstairs being brave, and that brave people get tired, but they don't stop. Margaret Hale, who had offered this man's family a check to vanish, had ridden up in the elevator with a child's small, warm hand in hers, and she felt something old and hard begin to crack. Margaret looked at Caleb. "You said I'd wish I'd taken your money back." "I'm beginning to understand." Caleb opened the folder. In 1949, 2 young men ran a one-room cabinet shop on the Hollis Creek Mill Road. Theodore Hale and Samuel Mercer. Theo had the talk. Sam had the hands. In 1951, Sam designed a chair, blind dovetails, a maple key, butternut and bird's-eye maple, and carved a little beetle into the crest rail, because that's what his father had done, and his father before him. He laid the black and white photograph on the table. 2 grinning young men outside the mill. "That chair built this company." "The Founders collection isn't your grandfather's work, Miss Hale. It's mine. It's my father's." Addie stared at the photograph. She had seen the beetle. She had asked him how he knew about it. Nobody knows about the beetle. Theodore took the designs to investors in 1952 under his own name, Caleb went on. Quiet, no anger in it, which made it worse. Sam signed a release for $200 because he had a sick wife and a baby, and he trusted his friend. He never said a bitter word about it. "I've had his original design papers in a locked drawer for 11 years, because I didn't see the point in opening old wounds." He looked at Voss. "Then I found out what you were going to do with them." "This is ancient history," Voss said. "It's irrelevant." "It's the opposite." Eleanor Reyes slid another document down the table. "You cannot license intellectual property the company cannot prove it owns. Mr. Meaty, Mercer, holds the original provenance. The moment he files it, the founder's designs are clouded, and no one licenses a lawsuit. The overseas representatives began gathering their papers with the speed of men who suddenly remembered an early flight. But Caleb wasn't finished. He turned the folder toward Addie and opened it to the last section. There's a room in this building you locked, Mr. Voss. The East Archive. 3 weeks ago you told a man on the phone to keep me out of it, so I had people look. He set down a thin stack of statements. Shell company in Delaware. Another in Cyprus. The overseas partner you've been pushing is 40% owned by an entity that pays a fee to an entity that pays you. The deal wasn't to save the company. It was to strip the one asset worth anything, route the money offshore, and walk away before the debt you engineered swallowed everything. He nodded toward the doorway. These gentlemen are from the Securities and Exchange Commission. They've had the East Archive since 6 this morning. Garrett Voss stood so fast his chair fell. For a moment he looked like he might run. Then he looked round the table at 11 board members who'd been about to follow him, and saw the exact moment 7 loyal votes became 0. You don't know what it costs to keep a company like this alive, he said hoarse. I did the dirty work for years. You stole, Addie said. She had risen, and her voice did not shake any more. From craftsman. From my grandfather's name. From me. She looked at the agents. Take him out of my building. They did. Quietly, without spectacle, a hand on an elbow and a long walk to a car. The door closed and the room let out a breath it had held for 2 years. The board did not vote on the licensing deal that day. There was nothing left to vote on. What followed took months. A forensic audit unspooled the full extent of what Voss had done, the inflated invoices, the manufactured debt, inventory written off as damaged and sold through the back door. The recovered funds, when they came, would not make Hale Heritage rich, but they would let it breathe. Caleb sat with Addie in her office the night it was finally over, the founder's chair between them, restored and gleaming under the desk lamp. You could have told me who you were the first day, she said. A guy who fixes furniture. He almost smiled. I am. I built a design firm after Sam died, sold it for more than makes sense, lost my wife anyway, and learned the money was never the thing. I bought your debt because I didn't want a stranger to. I came to restore the collection because I wanted my hands on my father's work before it went overseas in pieces. I never planned to tell you any of it. He looked up. Then your daughter drew you with a sword. I'm not her daughter. No. But Lily decided you were brave on day one. She's rarely wrong about people. It's the one thing she got entirely from her mother. Addie was quiet a long moment. What happens now? You own everything. Caleb laid Samuel Mercer's original 1951 design papers on the desk, faded brown ink, dated before the company existed, the proof of everything. The thing that could have burned the Hale name to the ground. He pushed it across to her. I'm giving these to the company, free and clear, on one condition. He nodded at the chair. The next catalogue says who really made it. Both names. Hale and Mercer, the way it should have read in 1952. And the workshop stays open, the craftsmen keep their jobs. You make real furniture for people who'll keep it 100 years. That's the whole deal. Addie looked down at 75 years of debt being forgiven in the wrong direction by the man who had every right to collect it. Why would you give this away? Caleb paused at the door. Because my father wasn't bitter, he said, and I'd like to be the kind of man he was. The 75th anniversary gala was held 3 weeks later in the great grey house above the river, the maples bare now against the sky going to early winter dark. The founder's collection stood under warm light along the conservatory wall, 12 pieces brought back from the edge of ruin. At the centre sat the Hollis chair, with a small brass plate that read, for the first time in 3/4 of a century, designed by Samuel Mercer. Built to last. Margaret Hale stood before it a long time, alone, an old woman reckoning with the wrong she'd inherited and nearly deepened. When Caleb came to stand beside her, she did not look away from the beetle and the crest rail. I offered your family $1 million to disappear, she said. You did. You could have ruined us. Instead you gave it back. She turned, and the imperious thing in her face had gone, replaced by something more honest. Thank you, Mr. Mercer, for being a better person than I was prepared to be. Caleb inclined his head. He'd have liked the plate, he said. My father, he'd have pretended he didn't care, and then driven everyone he knew past it for a month. Margaret laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of her, and for a moment the two of them stood as equals in front of a chair an honest man had carved. Later, when the guests had binned and the band had gone quiet, Addie found Caleb out on the stone terrace, away from the light, looking down at the dark river. You're missing your own party, she said. It was never my party. He glanced back through the glass at the chair under its warm light. It's his. She came and stood beside him at the railing, close but not touching. The cold came up off the water, and neither of them moved away from it. I made some calls, she said. The company's going to be all right. Smaller, honest, slower. A breath of fog left her in the dark. There's a board seat opening up. Creditor's representative. It's yours if you want it. You'd have to come around. Often, I fix furniture. You'd have to do that too. A pause. Lily would have the run of the place. The cook already adores her. The gardener taught her the name of every tree on the property last week. Caleb was quiet. Down at the river's edge, a heron lifted off the shallows and was gone. She drew you again, he said finally. Last night, same sword, but there were 3 of us in it this time. He didn't look at her. I didn't ask her to. Addie's hand was resting on the cold stone railing. After a moment without a word, Caleb's came to rest beside it. Not over it, not holding it, just near. 2 hands an inch apart on the granite. The way you set down a thing you finally trust will stay. Neither of them moved it. Inside, behind the glass, a one-eyed turtle watched over a chair an honest man had carved 75 years ago, with a little beetle hidden in the leaves, waiting all that time for someone to notice, and for his name at last to be read aloud